I need to read the transcript file to understand the source story's structure and details before writing the new one. Now I have the full transcript. Let me write the new story. I had off a 12-hour shift at the hospital when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Mom is at your place. I tried to stop her. I was still in the parking garage. My scrubs smelled like antiseptic and someone else's bad news. I had planned to eat leftover soup, maybe watch half an episode of something I'd already seen, and fall asleep on the couch like a functional disaster. Instead, I sat in my car for 30 seconds reading that text. Then drove home already knowing what I was walking into. She was standing in the hallway outside my apartment door in Mississauga, holding a car seat carrier in one hand, and a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil in the other. Like, the casserole was going to soften whatever came next. My mother, 61 years old, silver hair she refused to cut, wearing the long green cardigan she bought at the Bay in 2009, and considered presentable. She looked tired in a way that told me she had been crying in the car before she got out. I made your favorite, she said. The chicken and rice. I looked at the car seat carrier. Mom, it's just a carrier, James. It doesn't bite. Why do you have it? Because Courtney needed me to watch him for a few hours and I thought it would be nice if. Stop. I put my hand up. Whatever sentence that was going to be, stop. She stood her ground the way she always did. My mother was 5'3" and had never backed down from anything in her life, including the truth, which she tended to walk around very slowly while pretending to walk toward it. Can we go inside? It's cold. It was October in Ontario, and the hallway wasn't heated, and there was a baby carrier in her hand. I unlocked the door. She set the casserole on the counter, and the carrier on the floor, near the couch. I turned on the kitchen light and kept my jacket on, because it felt like armor and I knew I was about to need it. Where's the baby? I asked. With Courtney. I just brought the carrier too. She stopped herself even she couldn't finish that sentence cleanly. I wanted us to talk first. About what? About Ellie, my brother's sons, 11 months old, born to my ex-wife Courtney, 7 weeks after our divorce was finalized, which put the timing exactly where I had been trying very hard not to do the math. The DNA test had confirmed what I already knew, and didn't want to know. My brother Brendan had gotten her pregnant while we were still married. Brendan, who had been in my wedding party. Brendan, who had borrowed $3,000 from me the year before and paid back half. Brendan, who had the nerve to say at the moment, everything came out. I didn't plan it. These things happen. Like a pregnancy was a weather event. Like my marriage was something that just got rained on. I sat at my kitchen table and didn't offer her tea. My mother sat across from me and arranged her hands the way she did when she was preparing a speech. Brendan isn't coping well. Good, James and Mom. That's not me being cruel. That's me being honest. He made choices and now the choices have weight. That's how physics works. She pressed her lips together. Ellie is struggling. He's got bad reflux. Courtney barely Brendan promised to take him every other weekend, and he's already changed it twice in 2 months. I know. She looked up. You know? Courtney's sister told me. We don't talk directly, but Margot and I still have the same mechanic and it comes up. My mother sighed. Then you know the situation is serious. I know the situation is that Brendan made a baby and isn't showing up for it. He wasn't ready. I stared at her. And when you asked me to stay married to Courtney after the test came back. When you said it would be healing for me to help raise him. When you think his blood is just biology and family is what you choose. I didn't choose any of this. You're only here because you want me to choose it now. Her eyes got bright, the way they did before tears. I'm here because that baby deserves someone stable. There was that word, stable. I had heard it my entire life like a compliment. And only recently had I understood what it actually meant in my family. Stable meant won't collapse under weight. Stable meant reliable enough to load more onto. Stable meant Brendan could catch fire and everyone would look at me to carry the water. I said, stable is not a personality. It's a job description, and I'm not applying. My mother's chin trembled. He's going to grow up without a father. He's going to grow up with a father. His father is Brendan. Brendan lives 20 minutes from here and has 2 working legs. And a full-time job at the logistics company Dad helped him get. The question isn't whether Eli has a father. The question is whether Brendan decides to be one. Brendan needs time. How much time? She blinked. What? How much time does he need? Because Eli's already almost a year old. Brendan had 9 months before that to get ready, same as everyone gets. So I'm asking seriously, how much time does my brother need before this stops being a difficult adjustment and becomes abandonment? Because I'd like to know what unit of measurement we're using. Like I had pulled something out of her hand, she recovered slowly. You can be so harsh. You can be so creative about calling it something else. She reached for her bag. I tensed. She saw me tense and stopped. I just brought some pictures. Of Eli, Mom. He looks like Dad's side. Stop. James, he's innocent. I know he's innocent. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. I softened it slightly because the hardness wasn't for her, even if she was the one sitting there. I know Eli is innocent. I've never said otherwise. That's not the argument. The argument is that you want me to pour myself into a child to make Brendan's failure look smaller. My mother went very quiet. Outside, a car passed on the street. My refrigerator hummed. I was still wearing my jacket. I would never ask you to do that, she finally said. You brought a car seat carrier to my apartment. She looked at it. Something in her face shifted. Not guilt exactly. More like someone who had been moving fast and suddenly noticed where they were standing. I just thought, if I saw him, I'd feel attached, and then I'd be in. And then Brendan gets to disappear and everyone says, look, the family held together. Look how James handled it. Look how stable he is. I stood up. I'm tired, Mom. I worked a double. I love you and I need you to go home. She stood slowly. She picked up the carrier. She didn't pick up the casserole, and I didn't remind her. At the door, she turned back. Her voice was small. He has your father's eyes. I held the door open. Then Brendan should look at him more often. She left. I ate the chicken and rice standing over the sink. Because it smelled exactly like it always did and I hadn't eaten since noon. It was the best and worst meal I'd had in months. I should tell you how we got here because none of this started the night my mother showed up at my door with a casserole and a carrier. It started 3 years before that, when Courtney and I moved into a semi-detached in Mississauga, and thought we had figured something out. We were not a great love story. We were a good story. Comfortable, functional, warm in the right seasons. We met in Guelph during our second year at university, dated through her business degree and my nursing program, moved to the city together. Got married at 28. In a vineyard near Niagara on the lake with 60 people and an open bar. And everyone's parents crying at different parts of the ceremony. I thought we were solid. I thought solid was enough. I don't know exactly when it started with Brendan. I looked for signs afterward, the way you always do, pulling up receipts from memory, and wondering how you missed the total. There were moments I reread. A dinner where they laughed too long, at something I didn't understand. A weekend where she said, she was visiting her friend Tara in Hamilton, and Brendan said he was up north with his work crew, and neither of them seemed bothered by the coincidence. I filed those things wrong at the time. I put them in the folder marked not my problem. The pregnancy was what broke the seal. Courtney told me she was pregnant in March. I was thrilled. I told people at work. I told my parents. My mother cried. My father made a joke about finally getting a grandchild to leave the house, too, because Brendan showed no signs of settling down. Which was funny to everyone at the table including Brendan, who laughed the loudest. 6 weeks later, Courtney sat me down in our kitchen and told me she had to say something. Her face was the face of someone who had rehearsed for a very long time and still wasn't ready. Brendan was the father. The world had a sound that day. Not a dramatic sus. More like the sound of a room going quiet, when you didn't notice there was noise before. I called Brendan from the driveway 20 minutes later. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he knew. He said, I'm sorry, James, I didn't plan it. These things happen. I said nothing for a very long time. Then I said, I'm going to need you to stop talking. He did. I filed for divorce 6 days later. It was not an emotional decision. It was a mathematical one. I added up what had happened and what it meant, and where it led, and the answer was the same from every direction. The marriage was over. Courtney did not fight it. She was apologetic in the specific way of someone who knows that sorry is true, and insufficient, at the same time, and knows you know it too. We had no children together, no joint property that required lawyers to fight over. We divided things quietly and correctly. The mutual funds, the car. The kitchen table I let her keep, because I couldn't sit at it anymore anyway. Brendan called me twice during the divorce process. I didn't answer either time. He showed up at my new apartment once, stood outside for 10 minutes, then left without buzzing up. Margot told me later that Courtney's family was furious with him too. That didn't change anything, but I filed it away in a folder I actually checked occasionally. The one I labeled everyone already knows this is wrong. My mother was not done. She never was. She was built for persistence. She had raised 2 boys and volunteered at the church and organized 3 neighborhood food drives and managed my father's somewhat catastrophic cholesterol through sheer force of dietary will. She was not someone who accepted the word no as a final answer. She treated it as an opening position. A week after the carrier incident, she called me at work. I was on break in the staff room. I looked at her name on the screen, ate the last of my sandwich first, and then picked up. I didn't come to fight, she said. I know, I came because I'm scared. That was different. I leaned back in my chair. Scared of what? Brendan isn't going to figure this out on his own, he never has. You know that about him, you've always known that. He needs people around him who actually hold him to things. And everyone just keeps letting him off, and letting him off. And I'm scared that Eli is going to be 6 years old, wondering why his father doesn't show up. Her voice cracked on that last part. I can't watch that. I watched it with your Uncle Ted, and I can't watch it again. I sat with that. My Uncle Ted had left his first family when my mother was 20. She didn't talk about it often. Mom, I said carefully. I hear what you're saying. Eli shouldn't have to wonder about that. I agree with you. But the person who needs to hear what you just said is Brendan. Silence. Have you told him what you told me? More silence. Because if you've said all of this to me but haven't said it to him, that tells me something, she exhaled. He gets defensive. I know he gets defensive. But him getting defensive isn't a reason to redirect the problem to the person he already hurt. I'm not redirecting. Mom, you showed up at my apartment with a car seat. A pause. I see your point. I almost laughed. I didn't. I'm serious. The energy you're putting into trying to get me involved? Put that into Brendan. Call him every day. Show up at his place. Bring him the casserole. Hold him to the appointments. Be inconvenient in his direction for once. She didn't answer, immediately. I could hear the kitchen in the background. The sound of her coffee maker finishing its cycle. He doesn't listen to me, she finally said. Then that's your relationship with your son. But it's not a reason for me to replace him. She cried a little. I waited. When she quieted, I said, I love you, I want you to keep calling me. But not about this, she said she understood. She may have meant it. Either way. She called 3 more times that month about Courtney and Eli and Brendan, and each time I kept the calls to under 5 minutes, and he redirected her toward Brendan with increasing efficiency. Which was a skill I was developing that my therapist that's called setting and holding. My therapist was a woman named Dr. Okafor who worked out of a small practice on Huron, Ontario, and had an extraordinary ability to let me talk myself into the right answer without ever appearing to push me there. I had started seeing her 6 weeks after the divorce. I had told myself at the time that I was fine, which was how I knew I was not fine. How are you sleeping? She asked at our session the week after my mother's phone call. Better than I was. On a scale of 1 to 10? 6. Maybe 6.5, she made a note. And how do you feel about the situation with Eli? I looked at the plant she kept on the window ledge. Complicated. Say more. I don't hate him. I think about that sometimes, whether I should or whether I do, and I just don't recognize it, but I genuinely don't hate him. He's a baby. He didn't choose any of this. That's a significant thing to be clear about. But I also don't feel responsible for him, and my family keeps acting like those two things should be in conflict. Like the fact that I don't hate him means I should want to parent him. And they're not the same thing. Dr. Okafor nodded slowly. What do you need from the people around you right now? To stop asking me to solve a problem I didn't create. I paused. And to stop calling not solving it a character flaw. She wrote something down. I suspected it was making progress, but I never asked. Brendan reached out in November. Not through my mother. Not through Courtney. A direct text, which took me by surprise enough that I read the whole thing before I could decide whether to close it. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I know that. But I'm struggling and I don't know what to do with Eli and I. Keep thinking that if our situations were reversed you'd know how to handle it. You were always better at this stuff than me. I read it twice. Then I called my friend Warren, who had known both me and Brendan since secondary school. And had maintained a careful neutrality through the whole situation, by refusing to talk to either of us. About the other, until given explicit permission. Brendan texted me, I said, yeah? He said I would know how to handle it, being a father. Warren was quiet for a moment. Does he want you to take over? I don't know, maybe, probably. I looked out my apartment window at the street below. He said he was struggling. He is, Warren said. You've talked to him? A bit. He's not sleeping. He missed another weekend with Eli. He keeps telling himself he'll do better next month. Warren paused. He talks about you. What does he say? That he ruined the only relationship in his life that actually made him want to be a better person. I didn't say anything. Not Courtney, Warren clarified quietly. You and him. I sat down on the couch. I did not respond to Brendan's text that night. Or the next day. I thought about what Warren had said, and I thought about my mother, and I thought about Dr. Okafor, and I thought about Eli, who was almost a year old and had never met me. And had no idea any of this was happening above his head. And then I thought about what my family actually wanted. Versus what they said they wanted. They said they wanted Eli to have love. What they wanted was for things to be less uncomfortable at Christmas. They said they wanted me to heal. What they wanted was for my pain to become invisible faster. They said they wanted Brendan to do better. What they wanted was for someone else to make doing better unnecessary. I wrote Brendan back 5 days later. I heard what you said. I'm not going to be Eli's father. That's not something I'm willing to do, and I need you to stop hoping for it, even quietly. But if you want to actually show up for him, and I mean actually, not in theory, not someday, not when things slow down, I'll tell you what I know about being consistent. That's the most I can offer. Let me know if that's something you want. He didn't respond for 2 days. When he did, it was a single line. What do I do first? It came to a head in January. The family Christmas had been subdued. Which in my family meant only 3 uncomfortable silences at dinner. And one conversation that lasted too long near the dessert table. My mother had tried once to seat me next to Courtney, who was there with Eli, because my mother had decided that family meant everyone within a certain radius, regardless of how they had treated each other. I moved my name card before anyone sat down. My Aunt Linda pretended not to see me do it. We understood each other. The real moment came in January, when my mother organized what she called a family Sunday lunch, that turned out to be a family Sunday lunch. Plus Courtney, plus Eli, plus the specific social pressure of having an 11-month-old present, to make everyone's worst instincts feel like generosity. I didn't know Courtney would be there until I arrived. That was deliberate. I saw the high chair set up in the corner, and I understood immediately what I had walked into. My sister Dana was already there, leaning against the kitchen doorway with the expression of someone who had tried to warn me and felt guilty about failing. She gave me a look that said "I'm sorry" in very clear eyebrow language. I gave her a look back that said "noted." Courtney was in the living room with Eli on her lap. She looked up when I came in and went still. She had the look of someone who also hadn't been told the full guest list, which made two of us. Which meant my mother had planned this like an operation. "James," my mother said brightly from the kitchen, "you're just in time. Lunch is almost ready. You didn't tell me Courtney was coming. I thought it would be good for everyone too. Mom, you didn't tell me." She turned from the stove. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." That was correct information. I kept my voice even. "That's exactly what I would have done. And you decided that your preference for how this afternoon should go was more important than my ability to choose whether to be here." The kitchen went quiet. My father was at the table with his coffee and he set it down. My mother's expression moved through several things quickly. She landed on defensive. "I just want this family to be a family. We are a family. Families have disagreements and history, and complicated feelings. What you're trying to do is make it look like we don't." Courtney appeared in the kitchen doorway holding Eli, who was chewing on a teething ring and observing all of us with the calm assessment of someone who had not yet developed the capacity for stress. "I can leave," she said quietly. "I didn't know James wasn't told." "You don't need to leave," my mother said. "She's being polite," I said. "And she's right, that this was set up, without either of our input." I looked at Courtney directly. "I don't want you to be uncomfortable." Something moved across Courtney's face. Something genuine and difficult. "I'm sorry," she said. "For today and for..." She stopped, looked at Eli then back at me. "For everything." "I know," I said, and I did. My mother was still watching from the stove. My father picked up his coffee again. Dana had appeared silently in the doorway behind Courtney. "I'm going to sit down," I said. "We're going to have lunch, but we are not going to have a moment. Nobody is going to cry and call it healing. Nobody is going to hand me the baby and take a photograph. This is lunch. After lunch I'm going home." My mother looked wounded. "I wasn't going to." The high chair is positioned directly across from my seat. She looked at it, then at me, then at the floor. "Dan," my father said quietly, using her name the way he only did when he was very serious. "Let it be a normal lunch." She pressed her lips together. She nodded. It was almost a normal lunch. It was almost normal, until my mother brought out a photo on her phone, tilted the screen toward me across the table, with a smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly the right moment, and showed me Eli asleep, in a carrier at what appeared to be a fall urser, wearing a small orange hat. "Doesn't he look like your grandfather?" she said. The table went still. My father closed his eyes. I looked at the photo. Eli in the orange hat, completely unaware of any of this. Then I looked at my mother. "Put your phone away." "I just thought What you thought?" I kept my voice measured. "You thought if I saw him in a little hat I'd reconsider. That's not going to happen. And every time you try it, you're not helping Eli, you're helping yourself feel like you tried." Her chin wobbled. "That's not fair, Mom." My voice came out softer than I intended. "I love you. I know you love Eli. I know you're scared about what his life looks like. But you keep trying to solve Brendan's problem by changing my answer. The answer isn't going to change. The person who needs to change his answer is Brendan." The table was silent. Then Brendan, who had been very quiet at the far end for most of the meal, set down his fork. "She's right that it's not fair," he said. "But she's wrong about who it's not fair to." Everyone looked at him. He hadn't spoken directly to me in months. Not really. Not about any of this. His eyes were tired. "I texted James in November," he said. He wrote back. "He told me he wasn't going to be Eli's father, but he'd help me figure out how to actually show up." He paused. "He didn't have to do that." My mother looked between us. "What?" "He gave me a list of things. Practical stuff. How to set up a routine. How to handle the handoffs without making it weird for Eli. How to call Courtney without it turning into a fight." Brendan exhaled. "I've done 3 of the weekends since then. Without canceling. The one I missed in December, I gave 72 hours notice instead of the morning of." He looked at me for the first time directly. "That's not nothing, right?" I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. "It's not nothing." My mother had started crying, but quietly, which was unusual for her. My father put his hand on top of hers on the table. Why didn't you tell me? She asked Brendan. Because I didn't want you to think I was fixed, he said. I'm not fixed. I'm just trying to not be terrible at a slower pace. He looked down at the table. And because it was between me and James. Not everything goes through you, Mom. That hit her, I could see it land, she didn't argue. Courtney very quietly said, thank you, for the list. It wasn't a big thing, I said, it was to me. I looked at Eli in the high chair. He was examining his hand with tremendous focus, as though it had recently surprised him. I thought about what Dr. Okafor had asked me weeks earlier. What does a good outcome look like to you? Not this exactly, but something adjacent to it. I'm going to be honest with you about something. I don't know how this ends. I mean that in the most literal sense. It's been 6 months since the Sunday lunch. Brendan is still not a great father. He's a trying father, which is different, and I'm not sure yet if trying is enough, or whether trying becomes enough over time. Courtney is managing. She has her own support system, her mother, her sister Margot, a few friends from work. She stopped asking Brendan to be more than he is. And started requiring that he be what he agreed to. That shift helped everyone, I think. Including Brendan. My mother calls me twice a week. We talk about other things, mostly. She told me last month that she thought she had handled the situation badly. I told her I agreed. She said she'd been afraid and hadn't known what to do with that fear. I told her fear didn't make the choices right. She said she knew. That was progress. My father and I went to a Leafs game in February. We didn't talk about any of it. We talked about the penalty kill, and whether the season was salvageable, and whether my grandfather would have approved of the arena. That was also progress. Do I think about Eli? Yes. Sometimes I see small orange hats at the drugstore, and I think about the photo on my mother's phone. I wonder who he'll be. I wonder what Brendan will be by the time Eli can actually remember him. I gave Brendan a list of practical things and I meant it as practical things. I didn't mean it as a door, but I also know that sometimes practical things become something else over time. In the way that a fence you build to mark a boundary becomes the thing two people lean against when they're tired and need somewhere to stand. I don't know, yet, what I owe Brendan. I don't know if I owe him anything. He was my brother before he was the person who wrecked my marriage, and I'm still not sure whether those two things can live in the same sentence, without one of them choking the other. I'm asking that question in therapy. Dr. Okafor lets me sit with it. What I know is this. I did not abandon Eli. I was never his father. My family spent months trying to blur that line because blurring it made their lives easier. And made Brendan's failure easier to look at. I've refused to be the blur that cost me things. It cost me months of my mother's approval. Which I didn't realize I was still carrying until I set it down. It cost me the version of my family where everyone's feelings got managed at my expense. It cost me a Sunday lunch that will probably always have a slightly uncomfortable flavor, no matter how many times we try to have it again. But I kept something too. I kept the version of myself that tells the truth, even when the truth is inconvenient. I kept the right to decide what I do with my time and my heart and my capacity. I kept the fence. You can love someone from outside a burning building. You can hope they find their way out. You can even leave the door open, but you don't have to go back in. Just because someone hands you a fire extinguisher and tells you it's the kind thing to do,